okay with it. There you go. If it's not, just stick your camera off, and let us know. Let PJ know in the chat, and we will make sure that your name's hidden from when anything we do with it. But we're not. This isn't going to end up on YouTube or anything. It's going to be just used for our internal research. Also, I'm just going to prepare you a little bit. This is going to be like a conversation, or we're going to try and make it like a conversation between me, Em, and Joe. So you're in the room as well. So please feel free to like stick your hand up, interrupt if you've got a question or something. We're not going to make you wait until the end for questions. We'd really like to experiment with a different way of doing this. So first way we've experimented is playing this video in the background. I've never done that before. I've never seen it done on a Zoom call before. But yeah, we're giving that a go. The other kind of experiment is we're going to just chuck it around a little bit and see how we get on. So Joe's going to interrupt me, probably. Em's going to interrupt me. I'm going to interrupt them. So you're welcome to interrupt as well. Please do. So yeah, I've hinted a little bit about like my why and the reasons why I do what I do, but I can tell you a little bit more about it because it's really important in developing our understanding of why we are advocating for connection to be nature connection to be part of the mainstream educational curriculum. So like I said, I wasn't always like this. I wasn't always connected to nature, connected to people or to myself. And that's a really fundamental kind of triangle there. But I used to be the person that everybody would describe as a litterbug or a scumbag or whatever else people get called. I used to chuck stuff out my car window. I used to drop it out just without a care in the world, and it was a symptom of something much bigger. So I was struggling with mental health problems. I had quite a serious drug and alcohol problem at the time. I was having a great time, but what I now know was quite a significant addiction issue, and you know that addiction, real problems are just smoke to a fire, but we try and treat them like they are the fire. You're trying to chuck water on smoke, and that's never going to work. So what's the root of it? And for me, I luckily I had a bit of money kicking around. I bought a mountain bike. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I bought a mountain bike and all of a sudden everything was fixed. But over a period of time, that switch away from being totally switched off all the time to being a bit more switched on about what was in my surroundings happened through outdoor physical activity. It happened through mountain biking with other people and on my own. So the journey that I went through, people say you need to be alone, you need to get therapy or whatever it is. I did all of that myself and with my friends and with my mountain bike and with nature. And I talked about smoke and fire. The litter, as it's been deliberately dropped litter, if you like, is just the smoke. It's just a metaphor for a bigger problem that we're trying to tackle. So I always ask people these days, what's the biggest problem we're trying to tackle? Does anyone want to ask? Do you want to answer that question?
Whatever. Talk about your rocks if you want. Yeah, that's one of my favourite ones to do with.
Does anyone want to guess as to what we're trying to tackle? What the problem is that we're trying?
I think, Rich, like what you're saying about mental health is such a big factor, especially with the work that I do with the young people, and they don't care about themselves. So the prospect of being able to care about anything else and having that self-esteem and that ability to love and care for things is not there. So a lot of the work I do with the Trash Mob Academy with the young people, especially the young people in the alternative provisions, the mountain biking aspect of it grows their self-esteem. It's a new skill that they're learning, or they're really praised for what they can do. And then when we take them on our litter pick alongside doing the riding and spending time in nature, they get a sense of social responsibility, and they start to feel important in the world. They start to feel part of the world. And then that's why it all comes down to that connection.
So you've obviously hit on the right answer, Joe, because you know what the answer is. But it isn't trash. It's not single-use pollution. It's not littering. It's broadly disconnection. And it's disconnection from those three things that I talked about right at the beginning. It's disconnection from yourself, it's disconnection from places, and it's disconnection from other people. Again, I know that with my own personal lived experience. I did that. I was that person, and I knew what the solution was for me. So I figured it must work for other people. So I tried it with my friends, tried it with some other people. It worked, and I was like, okay, well, this is now what I want to do. I don't want to pretend that I've got my own event management business. I don't want to pretend that I have this big network of things that I do all the time, when actually all I'm doing is partying and making a living out of it. I need to have purpose. I need to have a goal and something to work towards. So I tell everybody that, and eventually somebody listened, the right person listened. And I'd strongly advocate, if you've got an idea, tell everybody about it. It doesn't matter who's listening, because eventually the right person will listen. If it's something you're passionate about, someone else will be passionate about it at some point as well. Just have the minerals, if you like, to be confident about your idea. But I digress. The issue we're trying to tackle is disconnection, and litter is just a metaphor for that. And that's why it's so tangible to deal with. So if you drop litter deliberately in a place, you've taken deliberate action to make that place worse, to make it worse. So you must be disconnected to that place. You've taken deliberate action to make it worse. Well, you've taken no consideration as to how other people might come across that place. So you must be disconnected to the other people that are going to share that space with. And over the last couple of years, we've actually been able to demonstrate, of course, we're all going to sit here and say, yes, my enjoyment of a place is affected negatively by seeing litter, but nobody's ever evidenced that. We've been able to prove that now. So we can say with confidence that litter affects people, or single-use pollution affects people's enjoyment of a place. And then really interesting and really importantly for me is, and Joe, like you were saying, is you must be disconnected to yourself, because you've been to that place for a reason, whether it's to walk your dog, spend time with your family, spend time with yourself, just go for a walk, go for a run, exercise, whatever it is. You're not respecting what that place is doing for you, or even worse, you've not taken any consideration as to what it's doing for you at all. So the cool thing, I mean, somehow we've managed to make litter picking cool, but the actual interesting thing about this is that means that the solution can be quite simple, or at least you can reduce it down to a word. The word is reconnection now, to people, places, and ourselves. So, but where do you start with that? Like, not everybody can just go and buy a mountain bike and go to wherever they want to go, like I was able to do. Like, I'm in a very privileged position to be able to do that. I'm not in a very privileged position, the situation that led me to where I was, but I'm privileged enough to be able to get out of it. So it's important to recognize as well, when you're checking your own privilege, is that always the case? Are you actually that privileged? How have you ended up in that privileged position? That might not be a privilege. But what everybody can do, and something that is harder and harder to argue with every time I talk about it, but again, please do argue with me, because that's what we want to see here. And then again, it's very difficult nowadays to get out of an echo chamber like this. So if anybody disagrees with anything we're saying, we want to hear about that. Nature connection is where we're going to start, because we're all part of nature, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. We started from it, we'll end up there whether we like it or not. So why not start there? Why not start with that which is the most basic? So that's why our mission at Trash Free Trails is to reconnect people with nature through the simple yet meaningful act of removing single-use pollution. We've been able to demonstrate that works. It's a booster jab, not just for nature connection and helping the environment, but wider environmental awareness, groups, being friends with other people, and connecting to peaceful places and self as a result. Now, a big part of my work broadly, and also like specifically with Trash Free Trails, is the education stuff. That's what got me hooked on it to start off with. And the idea was that I could help people without privilege not end up where I was. And that's kind of, Joe came to us with this idea, and all of a sudden the penny dropped. We had an opportunity to help people who needed it the most. And over the course of the life of the Trash Mob Academy and the other kind of education projects we've done, not just with young people, but older people, there's been this emerging thing that kids don't get out into nature anymore. And moreover, like, it's easy to blame technology. It's easy to say that kids are just locked behind screens all the time, but I don't know if there's any single parents in the room, but it's much easier to give your kid an iPad than it is to give them the attention that they need. And that's just the way society is these days. So again, sympathize when you're blaming technology, when you're blaming litter bugs, have a little think about why that might be. So I'm not going to sit here and blame technology, but what I am going to do is talk to you a little bit about a couple of schools that I've worked with, where the kids go, they get one trip to one place once in a year. And then if they're lucky, they get a weekend somewhere. Heavy, you've got your hand up. Sorry, I didn't see it.
No, I've literally just put it up. Like that was instant. Like I agree with what you're saying, but I also think there's been like a huge dismantlement of community. Like I think when a lot of us were kids, you'd go out, you'd play in the street, you'd play with your neighbors, you'd go to the local park. Like I was always out of my house going down the valley to where there was a little river, and we play down there all the time. And I think we've lost that as well. Like kids can't play in the streets anymore. Parents are really careful about letting their kids out. Like it's proven that we've got safer communities than we've ever had, but there's more fear about our community than we've ever had. So I think I agree with what you're saying, but I think there's more to it than that as well.
I think Heather as well, just so we do, like, I come across loads of like young people that do go out, but they're going out to abandoned buildings that are just littered and not cared for. They're going out to you know, to dump sites. So although they're getting outside, it's very different to what we had when we were younger. Like I remember going out into woods and all sorts, and you know, there wasn't a lot of people around. So I do agree with you that there is that lack of community spirit, but I also think that the places that they're going to are like littered, and it's what they know, it's what they see. So they're actually connecting with something that they just see as the norm. So although we're saying that they're disconnected, sometimes it's about reconnecting them with actually, is this right? Is this wrong? So it's sometimes it's changing the mindset. It's a very tricky one, I think.
The thing is with this is that, like, as humans, we're like pre-programmed to connect to something, right? And if our opportunity to connect with nature is taken away from us or not made available, or opportunities to connect with communities and other people is taken away from us or not made available, we're going to find something to connect to. And that might be what you're talking about, Joe. It might be a positive habit, but more likely than not, it's going to be something easy, something with a huge dopamine hit, something that makes you feel part of something else. I'm talking about drugs and gangs. That's what happens. And there's more of that than there ever has been before as well. And you can blame all sorts of stuff for that, but that we're a positive and solution focused organization. So the blame and the shame and the guilt and aggression doesn't work, but we don't think it works. So why let's and really, like, you can't really explain any of the stuff we were just talking about. Like, how has that happened? You know, over the course of however many 100 years, we've become more and more and more disconnected from people, places, and ourselves. So why not just try and, I say just as if it's a simple thing to do, but bring that back somehow. And what I've said for a long time is that nature connection breeds further connection. And I've seen it happen with my own eyes. Like, you bring people together to do nothing but remove single-use pollution who would have never been in the same place before. And you're talking about like a rugby player with a little BMX kid. They're never going to cross paths before. And all of a sudden they're fighting over the same Lucozade bottle in the bush, and they're having a little conversation about who's going to get the Lucozade bottle. And my dog's running around trying to get the Lucozade bottle as well. And then they have a conversation they would have never had before. So
and it's really lovely to see the generational mix as well. So you've got like a lot of youngsters, and you've got you know, older people. You have people from all walks of life joining the trail cleans. So it's not just the privileged on their own, and it's not just the disadvantaged on their own. It's everybody, and then everybody just sees each other as like a positive force, and that does something to you inside. You know, regardless of where you think your social standing is, whilst you're doing this, you feel important, and you feel part of something. And you know,
that's something that a lot of, like, your kids don't feel, but a lot of people don't feel as well. And we're giving people an opportunity to be part of something bigger than themselves, which is really cool. And that's the concept of self-transcendence I was talking about before. So yeah, go on, I'm sorry.
That accessibility piece is huge as well, because the trail cleans are providing that context for people to be involved. And I think it's really important to not put like to say, oh, some people are disconnected and some people aren't. It's like, how do you put the tools in place so that people don't have to like find that path for themselves? It's making it accessible, creating that sense of community, and as you say, trying to disrupt that norm of desensitization to litter, and coming a part of that community and having that conversation and removing it is one step towards doing that, I think, in a really accessible space.
Yeah, sure. So well, I thought this might happen if we went with the like unorthodox, let's have a conversation approach, but we're like 10 minutes behind now. But the problem in education at the minute is that nature-based learning or education in nature is an optional frill. It's something that doesn't happen unless someone like Joe says, let's get these kids out into nature. It's something that doesn't happen unless there's an individual or a group of individuals in the school that wants to get people outside. If those people didn't exist, then they wouldn't get outside. That is not right. And try and be positive and solution focused about stuff, but that is fundamentally causing disconnection more broadly across the education system. So the manifesto point that we're going to talk about, or we have been talking about, and we are talking about, we will talk about, is that we want and we're going to advocate for education in, with, and for nature to become embedded in the mainstream curriculum alongside all the other mainstream subjects. So if you take a look at our Trash Mob Academy content, that's exactly what that does, and it's still curriculum linked. It still delivers on all the objectives that the usual curriculum would deliver on, but it involves nature first and foremost. So we've got a couple of things that are going to help us do that, and Em's kind of heading up our research arm of our first sort of foray into a better academic understanding of all the gibberish we've just been chatting about for the last 25 minutes. So I'll hand it over to an academic who knows what they're talking about.
Wow. Yeah, maybe. So yeah, the kind of framing for this is, I'm sure like a lot of you know about the State of Our Trails report that was published last year. So we're really trying to look at how to mirror the State of Our Trails report with a nature connection arm as well, recognizing, as we've kind of spoken about, that these issues of single-use pollution and nature connection are perhaps more linked than you might imagine on face value. So the idea is to kind of look at, within this community and within the wider community, what nature connection looks and feels like, and the levels of it really within this community, so we can start to look at how we increase that, how we kind of broaden outreach, that kind of thing. And then you can start to look at the composition of that. So what is it that Time Outdoors on these trail cleans provides to people? And I think it's really important, like my kind of stance on this is that nature connection, or however you want to kind of see that relationship between people and nature, will be highly personal to everybody. And I think it's quite important to not have that like prescriptive, this is what it is and this is how it happens. So a big part of this is trying to kind of look at those individual differences, and then how that can sort of transform into a more collective narrative of kind of trail citizenship. So it's really trying to unpack what nature connection is kind of within this ecosystem, and then what the impacts of those are. So whether it be kind of personal well-being, whether it be that those elements of community, or kind of broader impacts on sort of values, behaviors that come from that kind of sense of being connected with nature, so that it's not just kind of a trait thing. So when you're outside, you're getting those benefits. It kind of becomes a state thing where it then kind of permeates into different areas as well. So in order to do all that and to go on that journey, as Rich says, we've been kind of chipping away at bits of research and coming up with a plan. So as you said, we've sort of established that there's this experiential disruption of nature connection or experience of wild places when people are encountering single-use pollution, which is important to recognise. And then it's really kind of interesting to consider how that impacts nature connection. So we've asked people, does seeing single-use pollution make you feel more or less connected to nature, or both? And it's kind of a really complex relationship. So for some people, it disrupts that experience to the extent where they feel less connected. For others, it helps them feel more connected because they're proactively caring for that place and removing it. And for others, it's kind of like a real mix of those. And when we've started unpacking why there's that disruption of enjoyment, it is those kind of negative emotions of sadness at seeing kind of litter in these places, or anger or frustration, which are obviously all kind of highly emotive reactions. And then on the flip side of it, we see that in removing it, there's that empowerment and that sense of tangibly doing something to care for those places that people love. So there's like a really kind of interesting relationship. And I just think it emphasizes the potential of kind of trash-free trails in this community to transform something that's quite negative into something very positive, something that's very action focused, that enables people to feel compassionate, and as we said, kind of that be the narrative of that sense of care. I'm aware I've gone on a bit, so if anyone wants to interject and say anything.
I was just going to add to what you were saying, that actually nature connection, it has been brought up by the Department for Education as part of their sustainability strategy. One of their action points is climate education, and one of their points is nature connection. It's so it actually states for the young people to have greater connection to nature. So and that's part of their government strategy to support the young people and the whole climate of the UK. They also then, another one of their DFE action points is about green skills and green careers. What Trash-Free Trails is talking about with nature connection brings all of these into play. So then it, again, just strengthens the point of bringing it into the national curriculum, bringing it into, like, rather than just like like an extracurricular activity, really putting it into, for me, I work in an alternative provision, so our curriculum is what is called broad and balanced. So we don't necessarily have to follow a full national curriculum. But when you're looking at mainstream education and in primary schools, we have to think about how we're going to weave these activities in, especially with what the DFE is saying, is highly important for the young people.
And I think, sorry, Jo.
No, I was just saying, and because of that, then that then goes into well-being, and we look at the impact of well-being through nature connection. And so it's not just about teaching the young people, it's teaching the teachers, doing CPD with the teachers, with the coaches, so they actually understand what we're trying to teach, because it's not just the young people that are disengaged, it can be anybody of any age. So it's just being really mindful to get that positive message to everybody. Sorry,
Yeah.
I just...
No, that was great. Thank you. I was just on your point about it not just being an add-on. It kind of echoes what Rich was saying earlier about it not being like a flick of a switch, but it's like a journey. And I think if we're talking about nature connection being this relationship that people have with nature, that relationship, like any relationship's a journey. And I think in order to be able to get there, it does have, as you say, have to be weaved in, ongoing, not just a random thing that's like thrown in maybe like once a year that feels quite separate. you know, you want it to be like permeating through things.
You want it to be
Yeah.
a permanent rather than a theme day. Oh, let's
Yeah.
go outside. It's, World Environment Day, let's do something, or Earth Day, let's do something. It needs to come through, their English, their maths, their science, their geography. And it is very doable.
I think that's part of the, like, people ask, like, why isn't there a bin here? And it's because, like, we're like, all too often it's a treat, it's a treat to go to the forest, it's a treat to go to the national park, it's a treat to, like, we're going on a school trip to the place, and it's like, that might as well be Alton Towers, because it's not something that they get to experience. It's okay, yes, they're not able to experience it all the time, but they see nature. And when I say nature, I don't just mean the national parks, the mountains, the forest, whatever. I'm talking about nature, might as well be their back garden, is an additional experience. So of course, when they grow a bit older and they start to do that less and less and less, because nobody's even giving them the theme park opportunity anymore, when they do find themselves in that place, it's always been a theme park because they learned that at school, which is where you learn everything else. And then at 16, you're not taught anything anymore, so if you have to take that stuff on yourself, right? And it's this back to the David Attenborough quote, which is, no one will protect what they don't care about, and no one will care about what they haven't experienced. So how do you expect, and it doesn't matter whether, like, I am not a climate advocate, I'm not a diversity and inclusion advocate, because they're the things that I don't know enough about to advocate for. What I advocate for and what I campaign for is mental health and overall well-being. But it doesn't matter whether you're advocating for mental health or whether you stand for diversity and inclusion or whether you stand for the climate crisis. If you're not connected to that which is most important, that which is most primal, and that which is most fundamental, then how are you going to connect to, how are you going to make effective climate decisions, whatever those are? How are you going to be able to connect to other people that you want to share this space with us if you can't even connect to that which we all have in common? And for me, the mental health angle, I hate that word, the well-being angle on nature connection is, it's no surprise to me that we're seeing more cases than ever of, like, what's called common mental disorders, such as anxiety, depression, to a certain extent PTSD and bipolar. And at the same time, we're 75% of children haven't climbed a tree, and more prisoners spend more time outside than your average school child in the winter. That's not, and then it's like, oh my God, there's a mental health crisis. It's like, no, there's not a mental health crisis. There's a nature connection crisis. There's a connection crisis. And it's the solution to all these problems starts with education. Now, what we're proposing, what we're advocating for, is beautifully simple in and of itself. Like, let's just make nature connection part of the mainstream education curriculum. Doesn't work like that. Everybody knows it doesn't work like that. So what do we do? What can we do about that? And something that I've been trying to do a little bit more of, and we've been trying to do a little bit more of, is that this education isn't just for kids. And that's why we have these digital action sessions at 7 p.m. on a Wednesday night. That's why we do, instead of sitting everybody in a room and having them talk to, with Lauren, were you putting your hand up there? Did I see that? Yeah, there she is. Go for it.
Is that yeah, I'm just touching on a few of those points of it not just being like kids and that sort of thing. Of it goes right back to the start when we had that pause, and how often do we in a working day encourage people to take a pause of their day-to-day routine? And like, that's a big starting point. It filters down from exactly that of every day I make sure that at lunch I get outside and I pause, like, and that sometimes is like, not all my colleagues frown upon it, but they don't quite understand how important that is to my well-being and my, like, being able to continue the day. And yeah, just that side of things. And the subtle conversations that I think a trash clean can help with is to start these conversations about, like, why we're in nature. And I think that's a really nice starting point of these conversations, because I lead a few kind of walks and rambles and that sort of thing, and always try to think of a conversation starter for these sorts of things, of like why people outdoors, and exactly that. How, yeah, I guess I'm kind of repeating the question, but it's more, how do we encourage more pause in our day-to-day routines? I guess that's a big one.
Yeah, I think that's, yeah, thanks, Lauren. I think that's huge. And it's almost that permission to pause, isn't it? Which like seems a bit ridiculous. And I think even in the outdoors and in these settings, that isn't necessarily always the narrative. And it is just about finding ways of embedding that sort of reflection and just presence and attentiveness. And there's like loads of research about how it not just being about the amount of time spent in nature kind of objectively, but it's creating those moments of like reflection and engagement that leads to that connection. But even though that sounds quite simple, it can be quite difficult to do, and it's having the mechanisms to do that. And as you said, like rambles and trail cleans are such a good setting to have those conversations where people are in that space. Shall we mention the cards as a way we've been?
I've got them. Yeah.
So I'll just talk about the cards quickly, if that's all right, because I used them quite recently.
Sorry, do you mind if Em just introduces them?
Oh, sorry,
Then we can talk about how we use them. Thank you.
That's all right. I'm really excited to hear how Joe's using them, because we've not chatted about it yet. So basically, last year, yeah, at some point, we were thinking about ways of how we could embed these conversations and these little moments and practices into the work of Trust Free Trails and trail cleans. And we essentially designed up a card deck, which is themed around the 5 pathways to nature connection. So been loads of research about ways of helping facilitate this connection. And the 5 pathways, if you don't know them, are emotion, meaning, beauty, compassion, and senses. So by engaging pathways and incorporating those into activities, it kind of enters into some of these conversations that we're having. So we essentially created a card deck with those as roots, and each one has either a question or a little practice that resonates with that pathway. And then what was really cool and was super appreciated by me was the Trust Free Trails A team. We reached out to them, and some of them went away and did this activity, and then you probably won't be able to see because it's tiny, but in sort of italics below, we've got a response to that statement from the A team.
That card out. You can't see it.
It's almost like we planned it.
I know,
yeah. Yeah, so that was just a really nice way of incorporating the A team, who are so kind of fundamental to getting this message out, into the kind of tool themselves. So there's that kind of shared experience and their voice in there. But I'm super keen to hear how Joe got on with them. So over to you, Joe.
Thank you. So I utilize them. I did some training with all the staff team across the trust. I did it with the adults before I introduced it to the young people, actually. And the idea started off as a wet play activity because I'd talked about attention restoration theory, that Kaplan suggested that mental fatigue and concentration can be improved by time spent in or looking at nature. So as an idea for a wet play activity, so to speak, I asked the adults to just come and pick a card and read the card, and then just envision that, and then write their thoughts and feelings. So it's always almost like a bit of a spider diagram, a mind map. So that was for the group that stayed in. And then I did a group that I took out as well. And I didn't give them the card straight away. I just let them have a walk, appreciate what was outside. And then every now and again, I would walk up to them and give them a card, which then made them one, stop and pause, because they were just looking at the cards, taking that time. And then it gave them the opportunity to connect deeper with nature, because they were thinking about what cards they had, and then had a discussion between themselves. They noticed more, they spent longer outside. So I did it, so I thought I'd trial it a couple of ways. The most successful group was actually when I just let them pick a random card. So you know, I did it with a group where I picked what they were doing, so I could then control the situation. But it was great. And the group that just took a random card, they spent 3 times longer outside in nature doing different activities, and they came back. And actually, out of the 4 groups that I taught, that group, they left the happiest. And you know, they were really, really buzzing to go on to the next session. So it was really interesting because I did it different ways, but I still got good at like outputs, even from the people that were writing, because they still had to think about what they have seen. So it made them connect to memories, and it still opened that discussion about different environments that they all live in. And so because I found it so helpful with the young people, I used it more to kind of bring them back. So where they would start getting quite a lot of sensory overload, and they really they'd become a bit dysregulated, they wasn't sure where they were going or what they were doing, I used it as a grounding technique again for them to have that mindful moment, see what's happening, and go for it. So I haven't played it like the game, but you know, I've really utilized it, and everybody loves it. And it's just something quick you can have in your pocket, and then just go for it. And it really does gives a lot more meaning to whatever you're doing, and it just allows for that time and that connection.
Yeah, that's magic. Thank you for sharing that. I think, yeah, it's just there being a prompt there, isn't it? And I suppose long term, you'd hope that the prompts aren't necessary. So some of the cards you might just like instinctively go and do that when you're outside. So it's almost just that like starting point to try and, as you say, encourage that and that engagement. Joe mentioned the game, which was my first dipping of my toes into game design. And the idea behind that was that it was just bringing that like element of play into it as well. Essentially, it's like you have to get all 5 pathways. It's a bit like Go Fish. You get all 5 pathways and then go and kind of experience each of those 5 pathways. But equally, as you say, just as a prompt to hand out, hopefully is initiating those conversations and those experiences.
Yeah, thanks guys. So I will just add on that a little bit. Like, so this resource is another example of us just having a go at stuff, which is pretty cool. Because we're so small and agile, and thanks to all of our like supported by partner system, of which Lauren is one, from Kickback Coffee, thank you very much. It means that we're able to experiment with different ways of doing things, because again, like there's a lot of research on nature connection, and there's a lot of, I say a lot, there's a good amount of organizations that offer nature connection as an optional frill for a school, for example, which is amazing. But what I haven't seen is something like this that allows people to integrate this kind of thing into what they're already doing. Now, my partner's a teacher and they're the busiest people in the world. They haven't got the time for like new lesson plans and new activities and shit like that. There's just no room for it. So how can we make this not a replacement for what you're already doing, but part of it? And we hope that these cards are just the start of something like that, because like Joe said, you can just put, like, you don't need to take the whole deck with you. You could just like, I mean, I've got loads of them, and I've got like 4 half-built decks now because I just keep taking some of them out, and that's not a good practice. But but essentially what I'm saying is you the beauty of these is that they don't need to exist in the deck, and they don't also need to exist on their own either. They can work together. But the other really important thing to say about these is, as with all of our work that it's possible to do so, this would have not happened without the community. And just to what Heather was saying to start off with, is what Heather said a little bit about this kind of loss of community connection and a loss of a sense of community, that has to be integral as well. So in the development of a tool that's trying to foster nature connection, you can't just do it from top down. You know, you can't just, me and Em couldn't just do it as the academics that studied it and the people that work it, because that would just be us telling you what to do. That's not how we do things. We try and, as much as possible, involve our ambassadors, because they're representatives of their communities. So Heather's an ambassador, Mark Wilson's an ambassador, Joe's an ambassador, Lauren's an ambassador. Anybody else on the no this one. But these, we are, like Jem said, we asked all these 52 questions to the A team, and then they gave us the responses which made this possible. So I was just going to read out a couple of the responses that I really liked. I haven't got the spreadsheet next to me, so I've only got the answers, but hopefully it helps. So connection is made when revisiting a place that leaves you feeling more positive than before and that deserves nurturing, care and attention in return. The variety of shades and textures of green is captivating. A British jungle found in the smallest of copse, punctuated with the fleeting orange and brown white of the butterflies, each dancing in a ballet for my attention. It heightens the richness of the experience beyond what you can see. That's one of my favorites, because that mindful minute, when we're doing it, when I've done it with people outside, I invite people I ask them to invite them to think about what they can see with their eyes closed. And with the adults kind of get it, but kids, you always get one that's like, I can see blackness, and you're like, right, not you. You know, but sometimes you get these, like, I did it at Thetford Forest, and you got this. Thetford Forest is like not really wilderness, but it's as close as we'll get in East Anglia, because they just destroyed it for arable farmland. But there's no running water near Thetford Forest for a good 70 miles, something like that. And a couple of the kids are like picturing this like riverbed scene with all these different like she could hear the water running over the rocks and stuff. And I was like, how have you come up with that? You know, like, where did that come from? And that's the magic that we're trying to get at with our work and with the nature connection kind of element stuff, is like that, asking the question, how did you come up with that? Because that's it. That's the moment that we're after in this kind of conversation. Because I don't know if I've said it already, but this is not like, if you're listening to this and if you go away from this thinking, I'd really like to be more connected to nature, but it's so big and complicated and there's so many like ways to do it and stuff, and it's going to take such a long time we've done a bad job, basically, because it's not about this long drawn out process. It's about noticing it every now and again, and that process of noticing is fundamental to the process itself. So noticing that it's possible, noticing that moment when you look at something, and I challenge you, my yoga teacher did this the other day, and I'd never even thought about it, but next time you go outside, look for something new. And even if it's just outside your front door, there'll be something you haven't spotted before. And just that moment where you clock it, that's the moment that I'm after. Forget everything else, just clock that moment. And why have you, then you can, if you want to think about it a bit more, you can start to think about why you've noticed that it's new, why you haven't noticed it before, why you've always walked past it and all that kind of stuff. But it's in that moment that the magic happens, not before, not after, not at 7:30 p.m, 8 p.m. on a Wednesday night. It's in the moment. So I invite you, if nothing else, to look for something new and think about that moment.
Can I
I've just got one more quote to read. This is my other favorite one. I've had an unsettled couple of days, but the familiarity of the view made me feel comforted. For the first time all week, I wasn't alone. You know, come on, like, the guy was alone. And that's just so pertinent to me about what we've been talking about around connecting to people, places and ourselves. Like, the person was alone with nature, and all of a sudden they felt like they're not alone because they're part of something bigger than themselves. And yeah, that's it for me. Those two quotes are why we're doing this and why these cards are so important. And yeah, why the work that we're doing is so important, I'd say.
Just following on from what Rich is saying about finding a new piece of nature. I know some of you may have brought some nature with you, and it would be interesting if anyone is willing to unmute and talk to us about your piece of nature and how you feel connected and etc.
We've got 3 minutes, have we? Yeah.
Who wants to go first? I think Mark does with his piece of wood.
Well, other than it keeping me warm this evening, I kind of know pretty much everything about where this came from. This was taken sustainably within 50 miles in North Wales. My brother-in-law is a log specialist, and he deals all this for me. But this sort of larch and Sitka spruce up here, this is all around me. One of my favourite walks up at the Alwen is somewhere I went to deal with my own sort of mental health issues from about 2010 till 2016, and associating that place with the smell of this wood, because it's all plantation up there, that's my connection to it. And I used to go up there to scare myself, weirdly, to be alone, and it was my opportunity to just walk until I got tired and reflect, and the benefits and the reward came from being out there. And it took me a while to realize that it was that behavior and that connection which sort of got me through the initial bits.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah. It's interesting how, like you say, nature can invoke that sense of place. And it's amazing that you came up with all of that from a log that you're going to put on the fire in a minute. I think that's beautiful, you know, like that's just a bit of wood, really, but it invoked all of that extra stuff for you based on all the stuff that what I think is what we've kind of been talking about, right? So again, I invite you to look for something new next time, you know, look for something new and see what it brings up for you. We have got another 15 minutes, but I'm out of knowledge now.
Does anybody else have anything to share? Heather, you've
I didn't register for the meeting until about, I don't know, half an hour before it started. I was supposed to be somewhere else this evening, and luckily I am not. I am here with you guys. But I could just go
and find something.
I can see a lovely green bit of.
There you go.
I've
got really bad lighting, haven't I? It's a pine cone. It's a pine cone. What can I tell you about the pine cone? A friend gave it to me. You know what? It reminds me of when I lived in France, and for a while I lived on the west coast of France, and it was all flat, like totally flat marshland, and I hated it. And the only place I could go was this woodland, and it was all these like pine trees, and there were cones everywhere, and I guess like this reminds me of that. But whenever I look at them, it doesn't remind me of that. It reminds me of my friend that gave them to me. So yeah, but I don't really ever look at them that often. They just sort of sat in the corner of my room. So yeah, I didn't bring it, but it's here.
But again, it's really interesting how, and you know, this might seem a little bit contradictory maybe, but it's actually not. What that little exercise isn't so much about what kind of tree it came from or the particular shapes of it or anything like that. But what I put to you guys is that the reason that you're able to invoke all of those emotions and all those memories and all those feelings from what is actually just a thing is because of all of those patterns and those like totally unique things in nature. Like you couldn't, I challenge you to find something that isn't natural. And like, does that remind you of anything? Not really, but like cut and shut, you know? I don't know if there's any documentation on that, but I would that's what I think. And that's certainly why I think this is important, because it kind of that what I just said kind of speaks to everything that we were just talking about, right? Like the absence of nature connection is resulting in people having less care for the environment and low mental health, because they're not getting exposed to fractal patterns, they're not getting exposed to vibrant colors, they're getting their dopamine hit in 5 seconds from a Facebook thumb scroll, you know, they're not getting a more considered serotonin norepinephrine release from, you know, continued exposure to all of those beautiful things that you can see in the world.
I think as well, like the point of that activity was almost that there was no point of it, but then there was every point to it, in the sense of we're not necessarily asking you to do something with it, but just by looking for something and trying to unpack why that item resonated with you, and then start to think about whether that is that it reminds you of a memory, or you find beauty in it, or it symbolizes something for you. The act of choosing it is one thing, but then like unpacking it even just internally and just thinking about what value and what connection you have to that thing. My thing's a bit of a hopefully not a cop-out because I wear it every day, but this is my bit that I brought with me. It's handily just around my neck anyway. But this is a bit of a bigger point to it, I suppose. So this necklace is made out of driftwood. There's a kayaker called Nick Ray who does a lot of work around mental health, and he for a time was making necklaces out of driftwood that he found when he was paddling. And I think for me, I like it, but also it's a reminder, even when I'm not outside, that that I've got that reminder, and I've got that sense of something that takes me back to that place and is a reminder of that sense of belonging. And I think that's also important because it's getting the gap's getting slimmer, but I definitely still have a gap of when I'm outside and getting all those benefits and when I'm inside. And for me, this is like part of a process of weaving outside and the symbolism of outside into everyday life as well, and just having those sort of mementos and reminders as well.
Thanks. Did anyone else want to talk? Oh, PJ?
I think it's actually not very trail based because it's a shell. But I like them because they're purple inside. I don't know if you can see it on the thing. But I think this one's best. Yeah. But the purple. And I like collecting shells and rocks because for me it's something that was alive once, but now it's not, but it's still beautiful and it still brings joy to people, you know? So I think even if you're not outside, and even sometimes when you don't feel happy or alive, you still bring joy and happiness to someone. So yeah. That's my shells.
Nice. We were
Oh,
gonna
Lauren, what have you got?
No, keep coming.
Mine actually is less of a physical thing, but more a reflection and more of something that I've taken to every day. And the reflection of like in mornings that I get up and go outside first thing, my day is significantly better than when days that I don't. And I think that's one something that I've carried like with me for like quite a long time now. Is like that actually is like the feeling of being outside and taking that throughout the day is a really big thing, and it's something that I always encourage people like now to do. And yeah, that's something physical, but also not, I guess.
I completely agree with you, Lauren. Sometimes my job can be very challenging and quite stressful, and I ride my bike to work, and just last week I thought, do you know what, I'm going to ride off-road. And even though it was really muddy, just the joy of riding through the trees and with nobody about, and I was singing at the top of my voice, and I was just so happy. You know, I'm not putting any road riders down, but it was just so much more exhilarating than riding on the road. and having to concentrate on cars and, you know, signaling and everything like that. Whereas when I went off road in amongst nature, I just felt free, and it, yeah, to going outside and riding it really helped make my days better. Yeah, thank you. Does anyone else? Ross or Joe or Jules or Emma? No.
I'll just jump in because I appreciate you all and thank you. I'm calling in from the States, and I'm just really inspired by all this work. And I'm holding a pine cone. I didn't even realize there was a prompt. I was also holding a rock, and I'm looking at some flax that I helped harvest and comb into a fabric textile. And there's lots of different pieces of nature. But I just wanted to add that you've spoken of it in many ways already, but we are nature too. So all of us have brought ourselves into this, and we have access to resource ourselves as parts of nature. And that in connecting with nature, it is important to try and use language like connecting with the rest of nature, right? To remember that we are nature too in this process. And so I'll just add that into this little lovely conversation and workshop, or you know, just workshop you're doing here. I really appreciate it and grateful to be here. This is really inspiring. I'm gonna be in the UK soon for hopefully an extended period of time, and would love to talk more with you all and collaborate in some ways. So just thank you very much for what you're doing.
Oh, thank you, Joe.
Can I just say thank you for answering my little mental question about, like, where is he? He has daylight.
I know, I was thinking that as well. Can I just say that just so you all know, Rich is not ignoring us, but his computer is having technical issues and he can't currently see us at the moment. So he may go and come back again.
He's gone.
Yeah.
Hello, I'm PJ. I'm the host now.
Can I ask, those cards, like, you can't buy them on your website. Are you thinking about making that something that's available so that people that are working to do Nature Connection can get them? Because I've, like, ever since I've seen them, I'm like, I want a deck of those cards, and there's nowhere to get them.
Yeah, I'm not totally sure what the plan is. That's a question for Rich. Initially, we were sort of piloting them and just getting feedback from the A team and the community on kind of what the response was. I believe there's plans for that, yeah, but Rich, I think, is better place for that. But
okay,
yeah.
if you want more piloting done, I'm happy to do some piloting.
Okay, nice, yeah.
If
We'll
you drop him an email, Heather,
Yeah,
and he'll be able to sort you out.
Cool.
I just wanted to say thanks, Joe, for your point as well. And I think it's really important. The language, I think, is a really big part of it as well. And I think Trash Trails quite often use reconnection as a kind of an acknowledgement of that. Obviously, we are literally connected, and it's just, yeah, that language of that reconnection and that awareness. And as you say, connection with the rest of nature and us as part of it, I think is yeah, really important. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of work around nature connection and well-being, and there's lots of research by you know, mental health organizations, and they talk a lot about ecotherapy and how it's actually, some people get subscribed it, like going to talking therapy, they get subscribed ecotherapy. So and I think a lot of us have talked about mental health and how nature has really supported us get through that. And that is because, like Joe said, we are part of nature, and that's forgotten sometimes. It's forgotten. And I think when we do start reconnecting again, or, you know, connecting in the first place, then that's when we start coming together as more of a whole person. And it means a lot to me. I like the day that my mum passed away, I spent the whole day riding in nature. It was really, I was with just three other people, and it was quiet, it was empty, and I've never felt so at peace and so small in the world as well. And I just, it just holds a strong place in my heart, and that's where my passion lies, and that's why I do what I do, and that's why I'm sure we all do what we do. And I think Rich is back.
I'm back, yeah, and that's why we have tech support, if no other reason. Because if the host crashes, then it's all good. Yeah, just before we wrap up, I just that feeling of insignificance, Joe, that you're talking about when you find yourself part of something bigger than yourself, makes all your problems feel like nothing in the scheme of things. That's all part of it, you know. So yeah, and thank you everybody, and sorry I just left rather abruptly just then, but yeah, thanks everybody for coming and sharing your evening with us, and sharing your pieces of nature with us, and sharing your thoughts and feelings with us. And we'd love to get some feedback on what you guys have been thinking, but we're not going to send you a form or anything. But if you've got the email, you've got our Instagram, fire it over. If you've got any questions, anything that you weren't comfortable saying or anything like that, like, we're all here. Yeah, that's about it. Unless anybody else from the team has got anything to add, I'll call that a night.
I just put a message in the chat, just to let you know, guys, that our next session is a week from now, I believe so. About the DRS policy, what we call the no-brainer policy. So yeah, hopefully see you there.
Nice one.
Thank you everyone for coming.
Thanks
all. Nice to see
Thanks
you.
so much.
Wait for everybody to go. Emma Linford, you can stay for the debrief.
Yeah.
How did that go? What do you reckon? It was nice and sort of free form, wasn't it? I didn't feel like restricted at all, but I don't know whether it was too free form, but it was nice. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I think it was nice just to have, I think because the number of people as well, it just made it feel like a chat, which helps me. I much prefer when it's like that.
Yeah, I think if it was a huge group, I think we would have probably needed to be a bit more structured. But with the group that we had, it felt nice. It felt quite intimate, you know, when you go to like a little intimate show and
yeah, it did feel a bit like that, and it was nice, and it meant like people could share a little bit more, which was cool. I like what that Joe guy said, that
yeah,
we all brought ourselves. That was nice. And